Hi, today's session is about interview basics. So if you are preparing to conduct your qualitative research interview, this is a presentation for you. Let's start with interview types. A very brief overview. There are three main types of interviews that we can make use of in research. The first one is structured interviews, which focuses on predetermined questions that we adhere to and there is no room for any deviation. We mostly use these in survey and market research. These are the phone calls that you receive with questions about how do you like our product on a scale from 1 to 10. They are very predetermined, they are intended for a large group of individuals, and they are very helpful because they end up being sort of coded the moment you finish. These are not what we make use of in qualitative research methods. That's not what we make use of. What we make use of more is semi-structured interviews, where we go into the interview with a preset of determined questions. We have a list of questions that guides our interview, and we call it an interview protocol. However, we still have the flexibility, and that's why it is called semi-structured. We do have the flexibility of moving around and changing and follow up with probing questions. And the last type of interview questions or interview types is the unstructured interviews. These are types of interviews where we go into the interview with no preset, maybe one or two, but no preset list of questions that will guide our interview. These are very qualitative, more focused on complex topics that need a lot of nuances, and they are usually used when a researcher has quite an extensive skill in interviewing individuals, and what really guides the whole interview is the topic itself and the discussion and the interaction between the two participants, the interviewer and the interviewee. In this presentation, I'll be focusing mostly on semi-structured interviews, although some of the things that I will mention with regards to adequate or etiquettes of conducting interviews applies in all situations. But I'll focus on semi-structured interviews because these are the ones we mostly use in qualitative research throughout our projects. Ideas to keep in mind include they are usually dependent on open-ended, pre-established questions that I can follow up with probing questions. So for example, I can start off with, do you mind telling me about your academic or professional profile? Can you tell me please about your educational journey? Whatever it is, that might be one guiding question, but I have follow-up probing questions such as how many years in the profession, what is the highest degree. Just in case they don't mention, I can follow up with them. I can have other questions that have no probing question listed, but as the discussion is happening, I can follow up with that. The interviewer usually is the one who controls the pace of the interview. I have the right to modify the questions. There's no issue with me modifying the question based on the interview progress. On occasions, you might find that the participant is not comfortable with this question, so you can move along and switch to another set of questions, like move to the second question if one you feel might trigger them and they're not comfortable with. Or sometimes the interviewee mentions something you didn't think of when you were preparing the list and you'd like to learn more of to learn more about that aspect, so you follow up with further probing. So you are in control and you have the flexibility to switch things around. It's useful when the researcher has some idea about what to expect. So you already know something about the topic, and not just about the topic, you should know the topic, but you have an idea about what are the general findings or general aspects that inform this topic, and you want to discover further. So I really, for example, I know that some of the challenges with technology integration have to do with the fast-paced change of technology or the learning curve that comes with it. But I'd like to know nuances further about what in this can be overcome and how can we overcome it, or different aspects. Or I know that training is helpful, but I want to understand further what type of training and what formats can be helpful. So these types of interviews can be very helpful in this situation, because my predetermined list of questions will be guided by my knowledge about the topic. They are usually more engaging for the interviewee because they take a discussion format. And this is something that I always recommend. Do not present it in an investigative approach. It is not like question, answer. You're not interrogating the participant. You're discussing with them. You're trying to learn their perceptions and insights, or gain more understanding based on their insights. Sometimes you'll see it in the literature referred to as general interview guide approach, but most of the time it is known as semi-structured interviews. Characteristics of a successful interviewer. First off, you need to be knowledgeable about your topic. If I'm going to conduct a research and an interview about technology integration, that shouldn't be the first time I talk about integrating technology within the educational sector. I'm not a language person, for example. That's not my expertise. I will never volunteer to conduct interviews about learning, English language learning, That's not my area of expertise. So you need to know about the topic in order to conduct that interview successfully. You should be structured, organized, and clear. It's your clarity and your structure that reflects on the understanding of the interviewee with regards to your questions and how you can gain the information from them. You need to be respectful and ethical. That goes without saying, but I'm saying it. After all, the interviewees, 99% of the time, in very few cases, they have to be there. Most of the time, our interviewees are volunteers who are willing to give you their time and share their knowledge with us. So we need to be respectful and we need to be extra ethical. Part of respect is being attentive while being able to remember and connect answers. So, for example, as the interview is progressing, if there is something that was mentioned earlier that links to what is being said now, noting that connection gives the participant the indication that you are attentive to what they are saying, and that's a very good skill. You need to be able to offer clarifications without biasing your participant. On many occasions, they might want some clarification, or they might not understand the question, or they might even start answering thinking they understood, but it's not what you meant or not the line of thought that you were following. You need to be able to clarify without biasing them and revealing what you're looking for or your previous conception about the topic. So you need to have that skill of rephrasing the questions with clarity without bias. You need to be sensitive and empathetic, which links to respectful and ethical. On some occasions, especially when we are talking about things that relate to psychological aspects within education, sometimes some questions might be triggering, sometimes some topics might be sensitive. We need to be very careful and be able to read our participants' body language. We need to be attentive to what they're saying, and if at any point we feel we need to stop, we need to stop. The participant is more important than the interview. The interviewee is more important than the interview itself. What do we need to do before the interview? We start off with ensuring that the interview venue is quite safe, comfortable, and definitely minimal noise and distraction that's out there. At the present time, knowing that most or many of the interviews may be conducted online through Zoom or any other platform, it's very helpful to make sure that the internet connection is stable, your location also is not noisy, so on and so forth. Next comes the scheduling. The participant or the interviewee is doing us a favor by joining and helping us throughout this interview. We need to be respectful of their schedule, not the other way around. We don't impose the time. We check with them what works for them and go for that. Confirmation and reminders are very helpful as we go through this. The forms are also of extreme importance to be completed before the interview, so make sure you send them the consent form ahead of time. And when you actually arrive at the interview time, you need to bring the consent form with you. Your interview protocol should be ready. You do not send the interview protocol to the participants. You do not want to bias them with the questions, but rather have the interview questions presented at the time of the interview. There are some occasions where individuals might ask for the interview questions ahead of time. It all depends on the given situation. Sometimes if you are interviewing somebody in a VIP or somebody who's in a formal position, you might have to share that ahead of time. So it's up to the situation, but most of the time in research situations, we try not to send the interview protocol ahead of time. We actually present it as we are conducting the interview itself. We go through the questions. The rapport. The reason why I'm mentioning the rapport ahead, like as part of what we do before the interview, because we build that positive rapport with our participants from the first moment we reach out to them, whether it is by email or through a common friend or colleague. No matter how we approach them, that's the first moment that we start building that rapport. So make sure that you are respectful, relaxed, composure with that, approaching them, and make sure that you show your interest and attentiveness to what they are going to offer you during that interview later on. Knowledge, you need to know your topic, definitely, and you definitely need to know your questions. You cannot go and wing your questions in the interview. You have to prepare your questions ahead of time. You need to have the list with you. And although we are fully aware that you change and modify, but the guiding protocol or the interview protocol needs to be with you. The recording, you need to make sure that you have a functional recording tool, an iPhone, an iPad. If you have two, that's even better, because it's always helpful to have two running in case one is malfunctioning, the other will work properly. And definitely we'll talk about taking consent for recording. And definitely always be ready to take notes. Bring your notepad and pen and pencil with you, because it will always be helpful for you to do that. So these are things to keep in mind. During the interview, there are another set of things we need to take care of. Introductions. Always introduce yourself respectfully and cordially, and introduce your research once again, even though you've done that through the email or through the first contact when you were recruiting the participants. Make sure you introduce it briefly. Make sure to give them once again the overview about the voluntary aspect, the consent form, the fact that they can change their mind and discontinue their participation at any moment. And definitely make sure to take their consent at the time when you are conducting the interview to record. If they say no, there is no pushing that can be done. You have to respect their decision and not push. And one thing to also keep in mind, if a participant is not comfortable recording, you don't want to record it, because the information that they provide you with will not be that authentic. They will not open up a lot if they are not comfortable with recording. So don't try to push that. Make sure that you have your notepad and pen and record as you go along. And my advice for you is, even if you are recording, take notes every now and then with the most important points. The questions. Make sure you have a clear question one at a time. Make smooth transitions. Do not make it truncated. As I said earlier, it's not an investigation. it's a discussion. So for example, upon finishing with one question and the responses for that, oh, that's great, thank you for the feedback, it's a very interesting point, how about this? Or let's move to another aspect of this topic. Make it a smooth transition. If you have to practice this ahead of time with a friend of yours, do that. Run it one time, 2 times, 3 times to get the hang of how you can conduct these if you're not comfortable the first time. Do that, because that will really make a difference in the quality of the data that you collect and the information that you receive. Make the progress focused and try not to go on tangents yourself. Now, the management of the interview and the overall time with the different sections, all of this is up to you. You need to make sure that you're not going to take overboard. Try to focus the discussion, bring it back to where you want it to be, but do not make the participant feel that you're blocking them or you're not interested in what they're saying, even if they go off topic. Bring them back in a smooth and respectful way. Feedback and reinforcers throughout the interview, you need to show, as I noted earlier with regards to the rapport, you need to reflect attentiveness, you need to reflect respectfulness, and part of that comes through facial expressions, visual and body. You need to look at the participants as they are responding to you. Do not look in a different way. Don't always look at your watch. Have your iPhone in a way where you can see the time without them noticing it, so on and so forth. All of these are important, and make sure that your the answers are clear. For example, on many occasions, it's very helpful to reiterate and rephrase, paraphrase what the participant is saying. Example. So just to make sure that I'm getting your point clearly, do you mean to say this? And if they say yes, then that's some feedback and clarity about the answer. However, throughout it all, remain neutral and unjudgmental. At no point are we allowed to give an indication that we're judging, especially if we are asking them about their practices. For example, if I'm interviewing a teacher about their teaching strategies and practices, I cannot be judgmental about what they are offering me. I need to be respectful, take it as it is, and make use of the data. But during the interview, I cannot be judgmental. Recording and note-taking, as I said, always keep a notepad next to you and make sure that it's unobtrusive. So don't go like this recording, but rather with the side of your eye, you can write down the main points in case you need it. So these are the things we need to keep in mind when we are conducting the interview. After the interview, we thank them. We thank them at the end of the interview and send an email after the interview. That's very good practice. We record, we make sure that the recording and the notes are appropriate and they were saved to the safe place where we have the folders. Make sure to take any notes and jot down any notes or reflections at the end of each interview. This is the freshest time and everything is in your mind. On occasions, most of the time we notice something or we reflect on something during the interview. Make sure to write that down the moment you finish, because this is the most fresh set of notes. Make sure to note that these are reflections or these are observations. So if it is an observation, write it as an observation. If it is a reflection, write it as a reflection, because these will come in handy later on. Transcription. We will need to complete a transcription. In the good old days, we used to transcribe by hand. At the present time, there are so many tools. We are so blessed. You can pick whichever one you want. I find the most accessible and the easiest to make use of without having to pay or purchase anything extra would be the Microsoft Office Word. It has the dictation function. You can open a Word document, press dictation, open your recording and let it roll. At the end, you'll go through it and listen. As you're listening, you can fix anything that is not correct and do the punctuation or the new lines and whatnot. Finally, member checking. The full transcript that you have or the main ideas, it depends. You can either check the full transcript, run it by your participant, tell them, please check, is this are you comfortable with everything I captured there? Or you can select the main ideas and send it to the participant, say, this is my member check, do you mind checking if I got all the points? So these are the aspects that we need to make sure of after, or take care of after we finish the interview. One thing to finish with is there's no single interview style that fits every occasion or all respondents. And this is as old as 1974. This is not with individuality, equity, diversity, and inclusivity approach. This is from 1974. Any interview format is not a one-size-fits-all. We cannot make use of one format to apply in all situations. As I said earlier, keep in mind what's most important is the interviewee being respectful of their well-being, their feelings, and their personal boundaries that they set. So never break that, be respectful of it, and throughout it all, do what is most comfortable and make use of your critical thinking and your decision making in order to make the best decision at the time, because each and every interview is a separate interview on a separate day with a separate individual. I wish you the best in all your interviews, and if you have any question, please feel free to send me an email or a note and I'll get back to you with anything that could be of help.